Hello, and welcome to Manage Your Stress Before It Manages You. I'm Bethany Zell. I'm a certified health and wellness coach and the owner at Zell Being Wellness. And this whole month, we've been focused on the topic of stress and stress management and how that plays into our overall health and wellness. And stress really can have positive or negative impacts on our overall health. So it's important that stress management actually become a foundational part of our lives and that it's an ongoing thing. It's not just a one and done type of approach. But in order to talk about stress and managing it, we need to first identify what stress is. And very simply, stress is just our body's way of responding to the different kinds of demands that it faces throughout the day. And these can be good demands or bad demands. It helps us push through those long nights with babies and newborns that keep us awake. It's also the same kind of response that helps us if we encounter a wild animal in the woods or any other kind of stressful thing, and gives us maybe a little more energy or stamina to run faster than we might normally and get away from those dangerous encounters. And this happens through a stress response that's caused by the release of hormones, either adrenaline or cortisol. And this causes what is referred to as that fight or flight response. So when these hormones come flooding in, it can cause those symptoms that you associate with stress: racing heart, flushing of our skin, overwhelming floods of emotions. And we have little gradual increases and decreases all throughout the day with these hormones. But when the stress response is an overflow of these hormones, ultimately, these hormones can impact a lot of other things in our life besides just our stress responses. It also handles how much serotonin we get in our brain. And if that word sounds a little familiar, it's because that's the one we refer to as the feel-good hormone. And so long-term, if we're constantly experiencing huge shifts in our hormone levels and our serotonin, it can take a real big toll on our overall health and well-being and our happiness in life. So it's important that we begin to look at our stressors. And so when we first begin to look at who is stressed, an organization called the American Psychological Association conducts a survey every couple of years. It's called the Stress in America survey. And when people were asked to rate their stress on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being very, very little and 10 being just off the charts, out of the ordinary, it kind of looks like the graph that we're looking at here on this screen. And you'll notice the blue line is males, pink line is females. So overarchingly, females tend to have a little bit higher or self-identified higher levels of stress than their male counterparts. And then when we look at it even further, you can see that even among age groups and different generations, there's a difference in how they identify their stress. And of course, this is all self-reported. No one's being hooked up to machines to get their exact stress. But when you look at these lines, the turquoisey color one is the millennial group. And that's like people who were born from 1980-ish to the year 2000. So they're pretty stressed out, or so they think, on the regular. Gen Xers, those are the ones that 1965 to 1980, on average, in the most recent data set that we have, 2019, they were about a 5.5. The baby boomers, which is the people born from 1946 to 1964, that's that green line that comes down. So they tend to have or feel like they have a little less stress than some of the folks who might still be in the workforce and dealing with other big life changes. Maybe these are some of the folks, the Gen Xers and millennials, maybe parents, and dealing with some of those more stressful age brackets. And then even older adults, this light purple line, those are the ones born from 1900 to 1945. Even though they identified maybe less stress, they're still stressed out. And I don't think it's going to be any surprise, though, that these age groups, the different age groups, are also concerned about different topics. They may not be, obviously the people who are retired aren't concerned about work stress or work stressors. And so as we age, the things that we're concerned about and the things that stress us out tend to evolve and change with our age. I may not be worried about some of the things that retirees are worrying about. I'm also not stressed about the same things that I was stressed about when I was going to college, or even when I had young children, when I was a parent to infant children, a completely different set of stressors than what I'm dealing with in my current phase of life. So as you can see, some of these younger generations are mostly, their top two concerns are money and work. And then it kind of goes down from there, and you'll see some overlap in the generations. It's just depending on the age that they're at and the phase of life that they're in. Obviously, they're going to be concerned about different things. So these folks are dealing with family responsibilities. Some of the Gen Xers, even some of these millennials might be starting to have families and children. And so that adds another unique layer to this stress puzzle. We do all have similar concerns. And again, we see some overlaps. But then as people start to get older, these are the baby boomers and the older adults. So in general, this entire slide is about folks who were born from 1946 and earlier. And so you notice they're starting to get older. And so they're a little more concerned with health related concerns. And then you've got some of the boomers who are still working. So they're still concerned, maybe not as concerned as they were when they were in their 30s or 20s, but they're concerned now because they're approaching retirement. So they've got different concerns going on. And as this pandemic has gone on for years, we can see even more stressors becoming common across generational lines and continuing on, even as things begin to open up. There continues to be a lot of changing information and renewed concern. And so some of these common stressors that we're seeing are, the big one was changes in income, loss of jobs, and how am I going to support myself? Maybe you're not getting the same amount of hours that you were getting before the pandemic started. Obviously, as we were isolating, certainly in the earlier years of the pandemic, but even just some of that feeling a little foreign, like going out in public now, as things are starting to open up, we still can get stressed out about going out in public now, not even stressed about the isolating. Now we're concerned and stressed about going out. And then that overarching fear, there's anger, obviously worry about our health and concerns that, we're going to get sick, whether it's due to age or whether it's due to this ongoing pandemic, concern for our loved ones and, their needs and are they being met? Confusing mixed messages. I mean, I think that's just the byline for these past few years, all these confusing messages that are constantly changing. And so how to keep all these things straight. And of course, as we get older and move through different phases of our lives, we're dealing with different people who are delivering these messages. Feeling out of control. And of course, as you age and sometimes we lose control over taking care of ourselves, and the things that once was easy or things that came easily to us become a little more challenging sometimes as we age. So this can add to our stress. Again, that overwhelm with information, and some of that's COVID and just in general, our nonstop access to the news cycles, which never, ever end. And the overflow of information was rampant long before COVID happened, and even more so now. Obviously, the cost of things, we've got a war happening across the world, and that's impacting a lot of our bottom line. So as things get more expensive, that can add to stress. How to access what we need, even as things are reopening. It's still stressful. It's still tricky to navigate some of the systems that were traditionally pretty easy to navigate, going to the doctor and getting referred to a specialist. Now there might have been delays, but now there's ridiculous delays associated with those things that used to be so easy to access. Maintaining relationships and how to do that, especially as things become more expensive. Do you have the funds that you need to go and visit and travel as, the the pump prices are going up and up. Fewer people can afford to travel and make trips to connect and be with family. And of course, that brings on disappointment and grief. And when that's prolonged, that can add to our stress. So, there are a lot of things that can impact us. And of course, stress happens all the time. And so we need to accept that there's going to be a certain amount of stress in our life. But when we begin to see that happen for consistent, persistent, extended periods of time, that's when it can really become psychologically, physically debilitating. Unlike these everyday stressors, which can be managed with healthy stress management behaviors, or these untreated chronic, we refer to them as chronic when they go on unchecked for a significant amount of time. Chronic stress can result in really serious health conditions. And some of these I was even surprised about when I first began researching this topic, because you think, oh, well, it's just stress. You feel a little angry or cranky and you might eat a little more, but it can actually take a physical toll on your body. And you can really begin to see negative health outcomes from chronic pain, chronic stress that goes unchecked for an extended period of time. And so things like sweating, night sweating, you wouldn't even think that your body would create this, but when you get nervous, sometimes you tend to perspire a little more. And so when you have chronic stress that's ongoing, it can really get out of control and become to the point where you need to see a professional to help get it back under control. This can affect your heart rate, blood pressure, the pulsating, freaking out, anxiety, muscle tension, headaches. Stress headaches are very real things. Stomach aches, feeling sick to your stomach. The dietary changes, hormonal shifts, those mess with the digestive enzymes and fluids in our stomach, and that can lead to upset stomach. That fight or flight response that we have floods you with hormones that can make you feel temporarily alert. However, that effect will eventually fade, and it will cause your body to crash after a prolonged period of stress. You can become hostile emotionally. Once a stressor triggers your fight or flight instinct, you can begin to perceive other stimuli as a potential stressor and lash out sometimes without even really feeling like you can control it. You're just frustrated or irritable and you're trying to defend yourself, and that can cause you to lash out. You can feel helpless. And I know there have been several times over the past few years, especially, where you can just feel like you're under a constant deluge of stressful events and environments and obligations. And I've felt many times like there was nothing I could do. It is the way it is. And, we've written off a lot with this COVID pandemic. But if that feeling of helplessness continues and the stress doesn't alleviate, it can really lead to those negative health outcomes. Obviously, that serotonin level that's affected can really mess with how you're feeling, whether you're happy or not. And continuously dealing with stress can easily slip you into a very negative outcome and outlook, so that you almost can't see the positives anymore. You're so focused on that critical, and you're feeling so miserable and unhappy. The loneliness piece, isolation, and stress really can become a vicious cycle. One of them feeds the other. And it can actually be tied to, and it's been tied to, an increased mortality rate when you isolate for too long and you're feeling that overwhelming loneliness. Stress can also lead to detrimental behavioral changes like binge eating or withholding food from yourself, or kind of an anorexia, trying not to eat. And sometimes we do that because we can't control the stress that's in our life, but this is something we can control. Stress hormones temporarily can halt your appetite. However, long-term exposure to cortisol can lead to substantial food cravings. So it's a very fine line. And that's why stress is a big contributor to some of this disordered eating that we see in the world. Substance abuse, a lot of people look for ways to numb what they're feeling. They can't handle the stress. They don't want to handle the stress. They would rather avoid it. So they might turn to alcohol or drugs to escape the effects of their chronic stress in an attempt to kind of take the edge off. But unfortunately, as we know, these dangerous coping attempts can really lead to even bigger problems, where you become addicted or abuse these tools that you were using as a coping mechanism. Sleeping habits can be disrupted through our stress. People suffering from stress can swing between feeling so exhausted and overwhelmed with their stress and so fatigued that they just can't even get up to face the day. Sometimes even the hormonal overloads of a stress response can cause that feeling of such tiredness, like you're literally carrying the weight of the world. Or you might experience sleep disruption that maybe you're lying awake at night, stressing and worried about the stressors in your life. And that can lead to an increased cycle of more stress and more insomnia. So, these are things that, again, unchecked can really play out negatively long-term. Long-term cognitively, stress can lead to memory loss, and short bursts of stress can sometimes help you remember events or details with clarity. But when it's chronic and it's ongoing, it can actually do the opposite and impair your ability to retain information. I mean, just think about it. If you've ever been in a stressful situation, was it easy for you to, remember important details about that scenario? Probably not. You probably were able to, remember the things that were essential in that moment, that little brief burst of clarity, but long-term, it really can mess with your mind. Concentration problems, very difficult to focus on things if your brain is buzzing with anxious thoughts or stressed out thoughts. And especially if you're worried about all the different tasks that you have to complete, that can be a concentration breaker. So as much as we can kind of put those stressful things to the back of our minds as we're doing the tasks that we need to get done, but sometimes the stress response overtakes our ability to do that and compartmentalize. So it can impact our concentration. And then one of the obvious ones that most of you are probably aware of is the depression and anxiety. The flooding stress hormones can make people more susceptible and even can lead to more of that clinically depressed or clinical anxiety disorders that we're seeing in the world. So more than ever before, it's essential that we are working on our stress all the time, and how we choose to address or deal with or not deal with our stressors is critical. It sometimes feels easier to default to some of the things that give us comfort when we're stressed out. So we might stay up late, binge watching a show, and that might lead to unhealthy sleep patterns. Some people turn to self-harm and look for ways to hurt themselves or to deal with their stress. Some people will hurt others when they're stressed out. And as I mentioned, overeating or binge eating can be used to stuff down or numb those feelings and emotions from the problems that we're facing, but it doesn't actually make them go away long-term. Sometimes when we are feeling out of control in some of the stressors and stressful things that we're dealing with, we can feel like we're grasping at straws to find anything that we can control. And so some people will skip meals as a means of just controlling something. It's a control grab. They grab out for anything that they can control. And in this case, it could be skipping meals. Isolating, the more that we attempt to isolate and just kind of make the world go away or push the world away, whether we're holing up in our houses or sleeping all day to try and avoid any and everything, it's not healthy for us. And of course, substance use or self-medicating is another means of avoidance, where you're altering your reality or self-medicating to deal with the stressors of the world. And so these are they're not horrible statistics, but it shows a commonality. These are all common things that people experience as a result of their stress. And so how we choose to address these things is important. So now that we have an idea of what the problems are, we can look at how we can help. What are some of the things that we can do to help with our stress? So we need to start with some basics that should make a lot of sense in light of what we've already been sharing. The first one is drinking plenty of water. Hydration is essential for so many different reasons beyond, just stress management. But I don't know if you knew this, but at the point where you begin to feel thirst, that thirsty feeling is actually a stress response. Our body is already beginning to produce cortisol and adrenaline chemical responses within our body at the moment where you feel like, oh, I'm a little bit thirsty here. It's already been created. Even if it's just a mild one, it's starting to mess with your hormone levels, those hormone levels. And so throughout the day, if you have multiple mild stress responses, you're setting your body up to have to work even harder to overcome those stressors. So you can you're better off trying to eliminate any of the stressors that are within your control to make room for the things that can't be avoided. So thirst is an avoidable stressor, and maintaining our optimal hydration will equip you to manage other stressors that you encounter. So don't wait for your body to give itself those thirst cues. Instead, sip water throughout the day. And if you're concerned and you're not quite sure how much you need, or if you're getting your proper hydration, I know this is kind of gross, but the best test is really to look at the color of your urine, because that's where you're really going to know whether you're hydrated and healthy, as you see on the slide with the clear, or whether you're highly dehydrated with that mustardy yellow urine. And just one note, when you wake up after sleeping, if you slept for 7 to 10 hours or whatever your sleep window is, you're going to have a little more yellow urine in the first thing in the morning because you haven't consumed any beverages, hopefully, while you're sleeping. And so you'll notice it's a little bit off, but if you're staying properly hydrated throughout the day, it shouldn't look like this bright yellow, highly dehydrated one. It might be, moderately, seriously dehydrated somewhere in there. And sometimes when you're that yellow, that highly dehydrated, it can sometimes take a lot of water and sometimes even, IV fluids to regain optimal hydration. So just be on top of it. And the recommendation is really to sip throughout the day. Carry a water bottle if you can, and just constantly be sipping, and don't wait for your body to start the stress response. Drink throughout the day. The other thing to note, some supplements, especially like a vitamin B, B vitamins will make your urine a little brighter yellow. So just be wary if you do take some supplements, because that might contribute to the color, even if you are properly hydrated. So drink lots of water. Don't create stress where you can control it. So this is an easy grab that we can be successful at very, very easily. Another one is getting good sleep. So instead of dedicating yourself to the whole night owl mentality and staying up all night while the rest of the world is sleeping, it's important that we get the proper amount of sleep. Because there are a lot of different health risks associated with lack of good quality sleep. And I know this slide is a little difficult to see here, but basically it shares, there are 6,000 fatal car crashes caused by drowsy driving every year. We tend to crave foods more when we're overtired or haven't gotten the right amount of sleep. And of course, no one's craving carrots or salads. We crave the sweet, salty, starchy, traditionally those craving foods. And that's because when we don't get enough sleep, it triggers our hunger hormone, ghrelin, which makes us feel hungry. And so triggers those and makes those elevated when we don't get enough sleep. And it also lowers our appetite controlling hormone, which is called leptin. So when we sleep properly, these hormones get rebalanced. The other big thing is that when we are sleeping, those hormones that got all stressed out during the day, our body resets and it kind of equalizes throughout the night. And so if we're not getting that good quality sleep in the proper amount, it's not giving our body enough time to rebalance those hormones. So if you end the day all stressed out with cortisol and adrenaline spikes all throughout the day and you're all off balance and you only sleep a handful of hours, you're going to wake up the next day and start your day completely out of balance. And then it's just going to get worse from there. And then when you sleep that night, it's not going to recover fully. So it creates this vicious cycle. And again, health-wise, you can see it contributes to lowered immune response. When you don't have the right amount of sleep, you're three times more likely to catch colds, almost 50% increase in developing some kind of a heart disease, increased risk of high blood pressure. And this is just from not getting the right amount of sleep. How crazy is this? So while sleep requirements vary from person to person, most healthy adults really just require between 7 to 8 hours of sleep per night to function at their best. And so it's more important, rather than the number of hours, it's important that you focus more on how you feel after a night's sleep, rather than, oh, I only got 7 hours or I got 8 hours. Because if you are not getting quality sleep, it doesn't matter how much of it you get, because it's not going to be enough to do what it needs to do. And so a lot of people will mistakenly believe that they have a sleeping problem because they go to bed expecting to be asleep for 8 to 9 hours. And so sometimes they'll start using medications or like Tylenol PMs or melatonin to supplement because they don't think they're sleeping long enough. But sometimes when you're using those tools to help you fall asleep, you're also not getting that restful sleep, and you wake up feeling unrested and still tired and continuing to feel tired throughout the day. So when it comes to those motives for getting the good night's sleep, we don't really think about the hormones, but that's why it's so critical, because they need to replenish and rebalance so that our energy, our immunity, our appetite, and all of our ability to cope with the day's stressors can just start the day fresh and be prepared and ready and girded up for all the things that you're going to encounter. The activities that we do during the day, those all contribute to our hormone levels and in turn, our quality of sleep. So a couple other sleep tips, the blue light. So technology, a lot of the technology that we have today, it emits a blue light that disrupts the production of melatonin in our bodies. And so if you're falling asleep, looking at your phone, playing a game, or checking your emails, or whatever you do, whatever I do, I'm so guilty of this. That light is preventing me from getting that restful sleep. And so I may physically be able to go to sleep, but what it's doing is it pushes back my REM, my rapid eye movement phase. And that's the phase that you need to get through to get to that restorative sleep. And so when you are preventing the production of melatonin with your blue light, it pushes it back. So if I'm on my phone for an hour, my body's going to need another half hour to an hour to process that blue light out. And then it's going to start producing the melatonin and those sleepy chemicals and hormones that kind of trigger that response. And so we do ourselves a disservice by bringing the blue lights into our bedrooms. Some people will even go as far as saying like the red digits on the alarm clock can emit that light as well. But I mean, if you can just go to sleep and leave your phone in another room, I think you're doing okay. But the recommendation is really stop using all technology at least 30 minutes before bed. No cell phones, no laptops, no e-readers. I don't even know if that's a thing anymore, but if people are reading books, if they say they're reading a book, if it's online, it's still emitting that blue light. So read a book, a real paper book. It won't keep you awake. And then obviously caffeine. Many of us deal with stress-induced lack of sleep by turning to coffee or tea or colas or all different varieties of caffeinated beverages. Unfortunately, caffeine stays in our systems longer than we even realize. So cutting back on caffeine can help with sleeping problems and even jitters. I used to feel like, oh, I can I can drink an espresso, I can drink a latte, a cappuccino at 11 o'clock and go right to sleep, no problem. And physically, I did go to sleep, but I woke up feeling tired and almost sometimes a little hungover if I drink caffeine too late, because your body is still processing that caffeine for several hours after you drink it. Several hours. This is not just like a 1 hour, 2 hour thing. This can be 7, 8 upward. How your body processes caffeine can be very different for each person. And so, I try and cut myself off by 2, because I know even though I physically can go to sleep, it's not going to be that restorative, restful sleep that's going to make me feel good. So getting good sleep. So the other elephant in the room is stress eating. And I don't think that I'm the only person out there who's ever struggled with stress eating. It did take me a long time to come to grips with that fact, in order to prevent myself from making unhealthy choices or decisions. I usually try and always have some kind of healthy, non-perishable snack on hand. Because going for more than a few hours without a snack, if you're going through a stressful situation, it can cause your blood sugar levels to drop and exacerbate your stress and your stress response. And of course, when we're stressed out, we're not, like I mentioned before, we're not craving salads, we're not craving carrots, we're craving high fatty foods such as meats, cheeses, baked goods. All of these things thicken our blood and make us feel tired, lethargic, and just not good. So this is not a good way to be managing our stress. Even just one high fat meal can increase our risk of a heart attack. Sugar is another one that we tend to crave when we're stressed out. And as a carb, sugar tends to calm us temporarily. But the problem is that it enters and leaves our bloodstream so quickly that it causes that sugar crash that everyone associates with sugar. So on the other hand, you can choose a complex carb, such as pasta or beans or lentils, any kind of starchy thing, and that can fill you up without kind of causing that hard crash that sugar does. But these are the kinds of things that we tend to crave when we're stressed out. We're not craving carrots. But you need to really focus more on getting the most bang for your buck and avoiding empty calories or snacks that give you no nutritional support or benefit. And so when I look for snacks, I'm always looking for a boost of fiber and a boost of protein as in my go-to snacks. So I look at the labels, I double check them. Even if it's a product I use for a while, I go back and I double check it occasionally because sometimes they'll change the formulation. But fiber and protein, they work together to really help you feel full and satisfied. And it helps you stay that way longer. So you feel a little more full. When you eat one of those Quaker Chewy granola bars or whatever, and they have no fiber and like less than a gram of protein, you don't even feel like you've eaten it. Empty calories, they taste good going down, but they don't. Once they get to your stomach, you don't even remember you ate because you still feel hungry. You feel empty. Didn't fill you up, and you're going to be looking for another snack shortly. So important to check your labels, continue to circle back. Again, we've been caught a few times where we got comfortable with a certain product line and then, checked it a year or so later and it's like, oh my gosh, when did they start sneaking that in? Okay, so I'm going to give you a couple of my go-to healthy snacks that I try to keep on hand. Some of these I'm not eating as much anymore. I was really, really good about keeping them all of these kinds of things on hand when I was in the middle of the majority of my weight loss, but I do try, in general, I keep healthy snacks around. I don't feel that I'm in a place where I need to have them in my purse all the time the way that I did when I was trying to lose weight. But all this to say, so some of my go-tos, so bars, and what you want to be mindful with bars, you don't want to go with just these empty calorie, sugar laden pseudo food bars. Okay. You want to look for your sugar content. You want to try and eat them in moderation. This is not something, even when I find a good, solid, protein rich, fiber rich bar, I try not to eat more than maybe one a week. Maybe I would never do it daily because, even if they're made with all fruit, and I've had ones over the years where it was just like ground up fruit and nuts and dates, but even those have a high sugar content because it's real fruit. I mean, it's just not added sugar. So just being mindful. The Cliff bars that I kind of have a preference for are in this picture. They usually have around 10 grams of protein per bar and usually at least 3 to 4 grams of fiber. So they tend to fill you up a little more, and they're a little bit larger than some of those, like I mentioned, the Quaker Chewies. Those are like tiny. They feel like they're like 2 bites and they're gone. But these tend to fill you up and make you feel a little more satisfied. Another great go-to is mixed nuts. Obviously, you don't want to take a whole can of these to sit down on the couch and munch on, because even though they are healthier, they do have a little more fat in them. Now you can get them in little 100-calorie packs already prepackaged and ready to go. So you can easily stick them in your purse, in your desk at work, or wherever you would tend to have a stress response. Glove compartment, if you're a stressed out driver, having them in your little console, it's a great little way to do it. If you don't want to pay a little extra for the individual packed nuts, because anytime they repackage into a smaller package, convenience packaging, it costs a little more. So you can make your own. Get that bigger can of nuts. Just don't go sit on the couch with it while you're watching TV, because by the time you get done eating the whole jar of them, you'll be like, oh my gosh, who ate all these? Mindful eating. So you want to put them into little bags, like separate it out into the portions. So you can take a baggie and put that in your purse or wherever you would have it. So mixed nuts. This was an unusual one that I tried early on in my weight loss journey. They are baked or dried chickpeas. This is a brand that I was able to find at our local pharmacy. And I know that they sell them on Amazon. They come in a variety of flavors. There was one that was like a Thai chili I really, really loved. The other one I really liked was this sweet cinnamon one. And it only had like, I want to say less than a teaspoon of sugar for about a third of a cup of these little things. So I just portion out a little bit of them, but obviously beans are high in fiber, high in protein. So it's a good snack that made me feel full and satisfied. And that sweet cinnamon one had just enough sweetness without being too sugary or too much added sugar. Even my kids liked them. So there were a couple times where I was worried that maybe they had too much fiber by devouring half of the bag of the sweet cinnamon ones. These little sesame sunflower seed snacks, somersaults, that was another brand that I found and usually kept on hand. I forget how many. These were little nuggets. They come in a variety of flavors. The one that I really liked was the Dutch cocoa. It satisfied kind of my sweet tooth without hardly, I think they had like 1 gram of added sugar, if I remember correctly. It's been a few years since our local pharmacies carried them, and I haven't ordered them online, but I know that they are available on Amazon as well, but somersaults. But you can find different varieties of these now. And, as organic foods and gluten-free things come up and are more and more up and coming every day, there are so many options out there. Just be on the lookout for some kind of protein, some kind of fiber. Another one that I found in recent years is just simply dried fruit, or fresh pieces of fruit are great, but obviously perishable. So, don't stick an apple in your purse and forget about it, because that could turn into a really disgusting mess down the road. But if you got some of these bare dried apple chips, and again, my kids love these. One thing I came across early in the pandemic were these coconut chips, and there's a chocolate one. Oh my goodness. So good. So delicious. Obviously, these dried fruit snacks don't have as much protein or fiber, but they're pretty clean and they're portable and they don't get rotten in your purse. So it'll satisfy your sweet tooth in a pinch, and it's certainly better than an ice cream store run. So I call it a healthy snack. I would probably avoid eating it every day, not because it's going to push me over the edge in the sugar limits, but just because it might trigger my sweet tooth to crave more sugar. That's how we work. Our body craves what we feed it, right? So if I'm always feeding it sweet, pseudo healthy options, it's going to continue to crave sugary things and sweet things. But if I'm feeding it, healthy, well-rounded things, a little bit of sweet, a little bit of salt, a little bit of savory, it's going to begin to crave all of those and not just one exclusively. So having healthy snacks on hand. All right, prioritizing physical activity. Exercise and physical activity produces endorphins, and these are the chemicals in our brain that act as natural painkillers. They help with our sleep. They overarchingly just help with stress reduction. And we all know this, but with busy lives, we need to actually make physical activity a priority. We need to be proactive. We need to schedule our exercise into our weekly calendar. You can join an exercise group for accountability, get involved with a group of friends who enjoy doing the same physical activity as you and get doing it on a reoccurring basis. If we actually put it into our calendars, we're less likely to cancel. You wouldn't cancel a doctor's visit that you put onto your calendar. And so sometimes even just that task of writing it into our agenda, like I'm doing this here, can be a means of holding ourselves accountable. And of course, if you do choose to exercise with a group of friends, they can hold you accountable. If you're going to a class and you don't show up, that's an accountability in and of itself. So schedule your exercise and tell people about it. Another thing is being conscious about sitting for too long. It can be very easy for me when I'm in the zone with my work to just get so honed in that 3 hours could easily fly by without standing up. And so a few years back, I had some colleagues who encouraged me to adopt a sit for 60, move for 3 mentality. And so for every 60 minutes that I sit, I try and get up for 3. And I've got a Fitbit that will vibrate to remind me of this. But if you don't have a Fitbit or something to remind you, you could set a little timer, but just a couple minutes to stretch, to stand up, stretch out. It doesn't have to be complicated, but sitting is terrible for us. It's terrible for our joints. And they've even said that if you sit all day, and even if you go work out hard for an hour or 2 every night after sitting all day, it doesn't undo the damage that's been done from sitting. So as much as you can get up, break up that sitting down as much as you can throughout your day. And then, a lot of people use the excuse, I don't have time to go to a gym. I don't have all this. And now there's new research that shows that even exercising 20 minutes a day and 20 minutes at a time, a couple times a day, can be just as beneficial as a 1-hour workout. And I'd even go further than to say, even if you only did one 15-minute workout, if that's more than what you were doing before, then that's something, start there. Even if you just do 5 minutes, whatever you can do is the best exercise for you. That whatever you're going to do, find one that you love and stick with it. And if you don't love it, find one that you love, because it's hard to force yourself to do something that you don't like to do. And I've struggled. I've tried so many different forms of exercise, and it took me years to find the ones that worked for me and that I enjoyed. But I guess you could do the whole mind over matter thing, but that for me always adds to my stress levels, trying to mind over matter myself. And so if you enjoy the exercise that you're going to do, even if it's challenging and difficult, it's going to motivate you to do it. You're not going to force yourself out of your comfort zone every single day for the rest of your life to do something that you hate. So the best exercise for you is one that you will do. So find out what that is. And even if you can only do 5 minutes to start, do 5 minutes. Do 5 minutes if that's more than what you did. And if you can't do it all in one chunk, even 10 minutes a couple times a day can be beneficial. Anything is better and more beneficial than nothing. And that's all I got to say about that. And if you can't handle a workout, and even if you can handle a workout, sometimes easy to manage our stress just through some basic stretching or deep breathing or a yoga pose here or there. There are some people that might have physical limitations and can't do a really hard workout every day. So finding a way to incorporate stretching, yoga, deep breathing into your day can really be one of the easiest, quickest, and most affordable ways that you can begin to manage your stress. If you have a moment to do some deep cleansing breaths in the midst of a stressful situation, you can actually sometimes feel that peace and calm kind of wash over you as you exhale. And so when I say it's accessible and affordable, I mean, there's nothing freer than breathing. So, pausing in those stressful moments to take that deep cleansing breath and exhale some of the stress and experience that washing over of peace. And again, there are such easy little stretches and things that you can do, even seated in a chair, just to stretch out, do little twists throughout the day, standing up, bending at your door frame. It doesn't require special equipment. If you are seated, it can be just as beneficial. Another stress relieving tip is to stay connected with others. This is essential. Isolation can really be a breeding ground for stress, and it's easy to build up our stress responses by going inward and retaining that tension inside of us. But connecting with others forces us outside of ourselves, and it keeps us focused on engaging with other people. And so it's difficult. Sometimes we live alone, and so we're already susceptible to this. And of course, now as we've gone through this pandemic and they've made us stay home and isolate even further, it's harder to get out of that comfort zone and get back out there. But even more important than ever before, I would say, is connecting. Even just making eye contact with another person or waving or sharing a smile can be a connection or a way to cleanse and heal. You really never know how many interactions a person may be experiencing in life. You don't know if the person that you see across the grocery store aisle is living alone or sad or dealing with something that they can't handle. And you don't know what your smile may do, or you saying hello or being friendly, engaging them instead of walking past them like they're not there or don't exist. And it's not necessarily an intentional slight, but I think as much as we can be conscious of the other people in this world and acknowledging them, it's going to help us and them, especially, when we don't understand the struggles that other people are facing or going through. We know what we're all dealing with in this world with the ongoing pandemic, but I always do try and wave or engage people. Even when I'm driving in my car, if I see someone walking, I'll wave. You literally just don't know. That may be the only wave or the only hello or the only smile that person may have the entire day. And it helps them as well as you. Stress can truly be a product of information overload, and especially over the past few years, information, news, guidelines change on a moment by moment basis. Sometimes it's coming at us from every single direction, and we just don't know how to manage all these different information sources. People are online, they're engaged in so many different places. It really can become an overwhelming jumble of information that's very difficult to sort out. So instead of just exposing yourself to all the communications, a great way to manage your stress is to really identify and identify and find 2 or maybe 3 truly reliable sources for the information that you're interested in, and stick with those. If you're interested in, national news about politics, find 1 or 2 trusted sites. I don't know. Maybe that's an oxymoron, a trusted site about politics. I don't know. I'm not going to make any more comments on that, but find a trusted source for the information that you care about, 1 or 2, and don't try and keep up on every single thing, because you could stress yourself out trying to stay on top of all the different streams that we've got coming at us all day long from every direction. Just find a few, stick with it. It's going to help you with your stress and not have to wade through information from everywhere, which will more often than not, contradict each other and make you even more confused. Making self-care a priority is huge, because as we go through life, things aren't always going to be easy. So we need to adapt and accommodate. We need to we know that taking care of our loved ones is super important, but we can't be efficient and effective at taking care of others if we're not caring for ourselves first. We need to take the time that we need to process the things that we're dealing with and the stressors that we're experiencing in order to care for the people that we love more effectively. This graphic isn't mine, but I love that it shares a few of these myths about self-care, and some of these may be familiar to you. Self-care being indulgent or selfish, or that it's a one-time experience, one and done. Oh, I went to the spa 3 months ago. Yeah, that was great. Stress relief. It's an ongoing thing. Self-care does not have to be time-consuming. It can be as simple as taking a few minutes a night at the end of the day to massage some lotion into your feet. I mean, really, self-care can be so simple. Just chiseling out a few minutes for you to decompress, breathe, and focus on optimizing yourself and being the best you that you can be. It's not selfish. You're not going to be able to serve or care for others as effectively if you are falling apart. So take care of yourself. And I'm not going to go to the airplane analogy, but we all know who gets the oxygen masks first. Take care of yourself. Then you can help others. And it really can be super, super simple. It doesn't have to be complicated. Spending time alone, putting yourself first, asking for what you need. It seems so easy, but how many times do we just swallow what we're dealing with because we lessen ourselves? We don't take time to appreciate ourselves. We need to care for ourselves, setting those boundaries, keeping ourselves accountable for them, staying home when we should stay home instead of going out and pushing ourselves over the edge with too many events or too many obligations, saying yes to too many things. So saying no can be a self-preservative form of self-care. Knowing how to, I read a book called The Best Yes, and it was all about identifying the tasks that are meant for you, and how when we say yes to every single thing, we may be robbing someone else of that opportunity that's better fit for it. So if I say yes to doing all the things, I'm not going to do great at all the things. I'm going to be probably moderately good. But if you do take on too much, you become inefficient and ineffective. So there may be other people better equipped to do some of these things. But if I'm always the one saying yes, they're not getting that opportunity. Don't take opportunities from other people because you can't say no. Say no. Forgiving yourself, taking a step back. Sometimes we just need to remove ourselves from a situation if it's too stressful. And that's a form of self-care, knowing when's enough. Okay, whoa, we need to back step here and just roll it back. And again, asking for help, asking for what you need, it's critical. We have to be flexible. And over the past few years, we've had to make a ton of accommodations. But as much as we're able to keep some structure in place, the better. Doing things at the time you would normally do them, getting up and getting dressed in the morning, even if you're working from home, eating breakfast, moving into a work area to be able to separate your home and your work life, creating those boundaries that may blur from extended time at home, whether it's maintaining specific areas for the different tasks that you do. If you do find yourself at home more often, creating those little areas, creating those healthy boundaries, keeping the structure, going to bed at the same time, getting up at the same time, even if it's on the weekend, it's going to help you with your stress because you're not going to have to work as hard to reset those structures or routines. If you do one thing Monday through Friday and then Saturday, Sunday, it's all loosey-goosey, you're probably not waking up Monday morning like fresh and ready to jump right back into that structure and routine. It takes you a few beats to get back into that groove. So as much as you can keep that structure, identify the places in your day that are standard and try and stick with it as much as you can. Because when things get out of whack and you're kind of just flying by the seat of your pants, that's where those additional stressors can sneak in. And then, of course, what you are experiencing may be beyond what you can control. You might not be able to overcome some of the stress that you're dealing with on your own. And that's okay. It's important and it's okay to get help if you need it. You're not alone. A lot of places have begun to reopen in recent months, and more than ever before, you can access telehealth options. Additionally, the silver lining of the pandemic, I guess, is that there are more resources available online from the comfort of your own home. And that includes a variety of virtual support groups, different kinds of therapies. Just be sure that you're looking on reputable sites for resources, or that you're asking a trusted friend or a healthcare provider. But never feel ashamed if you feel like you can't do this alone. You are not alone. There are so many people struggling in this world right now because of COVID, because of everything that's happening. But just in general, we're all dealing with our own things, our own stressors all the time. Everyone's got something going on that the rest of us have no idea about. So as much as we can be kind, we should be, but also knowing our limits and what we can handle on our own, and understanding that there's no weakness in reaching out or seeking therapy or some additional help, whether that's a trusted friend or a religious leader or a pastor or an elder at your church or place of worship. There's all different kinds of resources available, and you should never, ever, ever feel ashamed or like it's not okay to go reach out for those. If you do need some crisis information or resources to turn to when you're feeling that way, like things might be beyond your control, here are a few. But otherwise, I hope that these have been some tips that you can use to begin to look for ways where stress might be cropping up in your life, and looking at some of the ways you might implement some of the things that I've shared here so that you can begin to reclaim some control over the stressors that might be impacting you in your life.